Welcome. Today my guest is Matt Gabriel, and we're going to be talking about wilderness survival skills. Matt currently teaches wilderness survival skills throughout New England, and he has a YouTube channel where he shares his knowledge of the skills. We're going to discuss how Matt started learning wilderness survival skills and how he eventually became a teacher. We'll also discuss certain skills such as shelter building, fire by friction, and plant identification. And we'll learn a little bit more about Matt's life. I hope you enjoy my interview with Matt Gabriel. Welcome, Matt Gabriel. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
So I really wanted to start with how you got into wilderness survival. And I know you mentioned that your dad gave you a book when you were 11?
Yeah, about 11.
And was that what really got you into the skills, you would say?
Well, that's kind of what jumped it up a level. I mean, I've always been into the outdoors. I mean, I was in Cub Scouts when I was in elementary school, and I ended up not staying with it into Boy Scouts because we didn't do enough cool outdoor stuff. You know, we had a camp out once a year, canoe trip once a year, and then that's, you know, we did the car racing and stuff, and that's pretty much it. But my dad would take me hiking, and we'd go camping, and he'd take me canoeing and fishing. And as I got a little bit older, he'd take me hunting at my Uncle Tom's property. He belonged to a hunting club up in upstate New York, and we'd go there, the three of us, all the time. But when I was 11, I don't even know why he got me this book. I was always out in the backyard. Like, the thing about me is I'm different. Like, when I was a kid, I'd ask, you know, to have my friends over after school, and they just want to play Nintendo. And then once I got into middle school, that's probably when Sega came out. We had Sega, but they'd always want to be playing video games and stuff, and I'd always want to be outside. Mm-hmm. So they'd come over. It'd be the winter. I'd be like, we're going to make a thatched hut, or we're going to make a wigwam or a teepee, and we'd be out there. And after the first half hour, they'd start the complaints. You know, and I'm like hell-bent on getting this done, and we're tying things together and lashing things with string, and all of a sudden I turn around and my friend would be like gone. And I'd look, and he'd be like, I'd see him in the window in my kitchen with my mom having hot chocolate. So that's like what it was like for me.
Oh my God.
I've always been into this stuff, so I guess like maybe from my dad seeing that I was that into this stuff, he went and he just totally surprised me with this book. But I would always be in the yard working on things, out there with the BB gun, shooting birds and squirrels and stuff, and making traps. And once I got this book, that I really went crazy, and I started making underground scout pits, and you know, making spears and bow and arrows, and you know, all the crazy stuff.
That must have been amazing to go from just naturally having that inclination to want to do all these things, and then being able to have this book, which this was before the internet. This was before, you know, there wasn't a lot of access to these things. So that must have just opened up a whole world for you.
It did. But I mean, even before that, my mom would take my sister and I to the local library all the time, and she would just leave me in the kids department, and she'd go to the adult section or whatever, and she'd be like, don't walk out of this entranceway or whatever. And I'd stay there, and I'd always be looking at like sharks and like submarines and Native American stuff. Like, those were the big three. So I'd have these Native American books with like leathercraft and pottery and basketry, and I was obsessed with the bow and arrows. So like, even before I got the book my dad got me, I would be making really crappy bow and arrows, but I had a wooden bow and arrow that I made. I had a PVC pipe bow and arrow that I made and stuff like that. And I'd be playing with them in the yard, shooting at targets and everything like that. But this book really kind of pushed me and opened my eyes to the possibilities. And also that began to teach me wild edibles a little bit.
So, all right. So you're a kid, you learn all these skills. Tell me how did you go from that to then taking the week-long survival skills class?
Okay. This book that I got, it's Tom Brown's Guide to Wilderness Survival. And when I got that when I was 11, I became obsessed with the book, and I would be be out in the backyard with that. I had a little fort I built up on a tree out of my dad's rope, and I'd be sitting up there reading like 15 feet up in the tree. And I read this book until it was falling apart, and it's held together. I still have it. It's held together with tape. But I had a hard time with some of the things. Like when I was 11, I was out in the backyard doing bow drill and hand drill. But, I don't think I even ever got a cold. I just had a hard time with it because, like you said, we didn't have the internet, and all I had to go from was that one book. Yeah. So I tried, and I was using the wrong wood and the wrong pressure and sitting the wrong way and all the different things. But I feel like when I went to the survival school, having somebody actually sit you down and show you and be there to answer questions, that made all the difference for me. And it was like a revelation. Like a lot of these skills in the book I got, but a lot of them I had trouble with also. And I felt like some of it was kind of like, oh, I'll never be able to do that. This is for experts and that kind of thing. But then taking the standard class, which they call that at tracker school, it was just like, I saw it and I was like, duh. Like, it's not anything crazy. Like, it's totally simple. I get it now. And once they showed me a few concepts and a few things, I was like, that's it. That's all I need. That's all I need now.
Yeah.
And the rest of it kind of fell in place. How that came about was I was becoming a father for the first time. So it was like the protective father instinct, I guess, in me kicking in that made me want to do this. And I was nervous. Like, it was like the night before I was going to go, and I'm like, I don't want to go anymore. I was like, I almost didn't go. I was like, I don't care about money. I just don't want to go. So I went, and I had the time of my life there, and it really opened my eyes just having somebody show me that way. That's the difference between learning something from a book and having an instructor, why it's so valuable now. And the coolest part is, for me, is that I ended up going to the school that's run by the man that wrote that book that my dad gave me when I was 11. His name is Tom Brown Jr., and I went to his school in New Jersey, Tracker School, as you know.
Yeah, in that class we had to build our own debris hut, and I think I remember finding you in your debris hut and hearing you snore from outside.
I was laying on my back, and I had a little grass mat that I would roll down the entrance, and I remember laying on my back and hearing it be rolled up, and I remember seeing you and Rourke standing there upside down, like, is he dead? Kind of thing.
Had you built a debris hut before that?
Yeah, crappy ones. Just going from the photos in Tom's book, which is like the very basic form of it. I mean, the way they taught it to us at the advanced course was like blowing that out of the water, way beyond that, and understanding it. And like the way I teach this to people is like the frame and the leaves on top of the frame are like your tent. That shelters you from the wind, the rain, the snow, and whatnot. But stuffing the inside is your sleeping bag, right? And then making sure there's stuff underneath you, whether it's grass mat or leaves, is like your sleeping mat, your sleeping pad that would go under your sleeping bag. So you need to have all three of those things, and then you're golden. You're good. Yeah, I've camped out here. I have one in my backyard. I've had several in different places in the woods, and then I slept for in at tracker school for the week in that one. Yeah. And dude, that week, do you remember there was like a day or two where it just like downpoured?
Yeah.
I remember being in class, like Carmen was teaching us baskets, and there was like sheets of rain falling down next to us and stuff. And I went into my debris hut, and there was like not a drop of water in there. I was like so excited. I mean, the shelter is amazing. It's an amazing shelter.
Just the basic concept of it is so simple. And I think that's one of the things about the skills that fascinates me the most, because I think I tend to overcomplicate and overthink everything. And it's so basic and simple. It's basic physics, really. The answer is usually right there in front of us. We just have to see it. Like the debris hut was inspired largely by a squirrel's nest.
Yeah.
The animals are doing that already, and if we sit and watch what they're doing, we can learn from them.
I think the other problem that a lot of adults have, and Tom talked about this at tracker school too, is like you have to look at like what kids do, because kids have like they instinctively know how to, like my son just turned 3 yesterday, my little guy Cole, and he's like super into building forts right now. He's like just getting into building forts, and he always makes them real small, and like I'm curled up in there and I'm getting like claustrophobic and I can't get out, and if I get out my foot breaks it and that kind of thing. But adults think of a shelter as like your house, and we think big. And if you think of a bushcraft shelter, most people think of like a lean-to. A lean-to is like the crappiest shelter you could ever have, because you need a fire going to heat it, but then a lot of the heat is lost, and then if it's windy out, you're in the wind. You can't change the direction. Once it's built, man. But like the debris hut is like the opposite. It's like what a kid would want to do for shelter. It's little, you heat it yourself, it's small, and because of that, you can just heat the whole thing with your body heat. Nothing gets in there.
Through your experience of building shelters, do you have any quick tips for people who might be starting out on this journey?
Yeah, the first one and the main one you need to learn and focus on is the debris hut, because that is by far the most important shelter to know for emergency use. It is the warmest, waterproof, windproof, snowproof, but you've got to know how to do it right. You've got to understand the principles behind it. And, you know, if you go on YouTube and type in debris hut, I've got a debris hut video on there. But debris hut by far is the most important one to know and to master. And the way you master it is to build one in your backyard in the fall or the winter after the leaves are all down. You know, if you're raking or whatever anyway, or build the debris hut with them. And then when you're done with the debris hut, you can then get rid of the leaves or whatever you do with them. But build one in your backyard. That way, if you do it wrong and you screw up and you get wet or you get cold, you just go back in the house and no one needs to know except for you. You're not going to be embarrassed. You're not a failure. But you need to learn that. Aside from that, if you want to get into building larger shelters, the most important thing to know is learn lashing. I use lashing for the wigwam and for my cloverleaf shelter. And I have a video on the lashing technique I use too, but it's called Japanese square lashing. It's the fastest, strongest, most efficient way to lash, and that's the only lashing that I use.
Okay, so now I want to move into plants. Why are you drawn to plants, and what about them do you think is so important to learn?
Okay, the short answer is they're so important because you need a knowledge of plants for every other skill that there is as far as survival and bushcraft. I didn't realize that, because I thought before we went to tracker school, I'm like, yeah, you know, I've read the book, you know, my mom's always been into gardening and teaching me about growing stuff, and you know, my parents have an acre, and I made myself pine needle tea when I was a kid and all this stuff. I'm like, I'm good. So I wanted to learn all the cool, sexy stuff, fire and making spears and bow and arrows, and I was like all about that. In tracker school, when it came to like, I forget the woman's name. She was like from Virginia. She drove up from Virginia to teach us the plants, and I was like watching the birds playing, and I did not care less about the plants. I remember I was driving home, all like juiced up on like what I'm going to work on as soon as I get home, and I'm like, I'm going to work on bows, and I was like, crap, I don't know how to identify trees. I was like, I want to make a hand drill and a bow drill, and I'm like, I don't know how to identify what wood to get. And I was like, crap, and like thing after thing that I wanted to work on, I was like, I'm an idiot. I did it again. So
it all leads back to plants.
People, I think the obvious thing that everyone thinks of is just, wild edibles, you know, that kind of thing.
Yep. Or hippies. Hippies. It's like funny. It's like hippies with their plants, you know? What do you think are some of the most important plants for people to know?
Well, there's the big four that we learned at tracker school, obviously. Yeah, so we were taught it as the big four. I like to call it the Fantastic Four.
Nice.
So it's grass, cattails, oak trees, and pine trees. They're the big four, and the reason they're the big four is because they grow all throughout North America. The idea is like if we took you in an airplane and you jumped out anywhere in the country, any time of the year, anywhere in the country, if we dropped you off, you can walk, and within walking distance you can find 3 out of those 4. and be able to find edible parts, medicine, utility parts year round. So they're everywhere, especially here in New England. We can drop them anywhere in where you are or where I am, and you can find all four.
Yeah.
And the places where you'd find 3 out of the 4 would be like in the desert, like you're out in Nevada or something, you find 3 of them. Around here in the Northeast, you can find all 4 anywhere, everywhere. I mean, grass is one of them. Everyone's got grass nearby. Yeah. Most of us have pine trees nearby. Most of us have oak trees nearby. Cattails are kind of the wild card, but if you're driving and there's a swampy area or a pond or a lake, there'll be cattails in there, and you'll see them. Aside from that, though, it's whatever is in your backyard. That's where to start. And you can just, practice with them, observe them. You can see them in all 4 seasons, which is a big deal. Be able to identify wild edibles and medicinal and utility plants any time of the year. Even if they know how to forage in the summer or in the spring or whatever, they don't know what that looks like in the winter or in the fall or whatever. That's an important thing.
Picking a plant or two that's available to you, and then just kind of observing it throughout the seasons.
Yeah. Well, I have like an acre here, and when I bought the house, we had a lot of wild edibles here already. But when I'm at work and I see things, I'll dig them up and I'll bring them here and I'll stick them in the ground so I have more variety in my yard here. So that's really helped me being able to see how they grow and what places and what light and what soil they prefer, and see them in all 4 seasons and all of that. Your backyard's the most important. Even if you're in the city, if you're in an apartment complex, I used to live in several apartments, so I'd still be looking at the plants there.
Anything else you want to share about plants?
Focus on what's in your yard and then focus on those 4. You really don't need anything else, honestly. Yeah. Everything else is just bonus. Yeah.
You're living large. Oh my gosh. Well, what about for someone who's just starting out with fire by friction? Do you have any tips or suggestions?
Yeah, the most important thing is to focus on your fire structure and the gathering of your fire making materials and your tinder. You need to think up, because the stuff in the trees, the air dries it, and a lot of times if it's like evergreen trees like pines, it'll kind of shelter a little bit so it gets less wet underneath them. So if you look at, I guarantee you, if you go out in your yard or wherever you are and you look up at every single tree, there are dead branches that are still up there in that tree. You don't want to be climbing trees for this, but there are tons of stuff within arm's reach that you can just snap off. No saw, no tools, just with your hands safely. Break it off. That stuff is dead, it's dried out, but it's off the ground. And that's what you need to focus on. And you gather all different sizes, bring a whole bundle. When you get back to where you're going to make your fire, you break it into, the toothpick thick, the pencil thick, the thumb thick, and the wrist thick, and your piles, and then also tinder. So focus on finding good dry materials. Get it all set up. Get your teepee fire all set up. And then worry about actually making the fire with whatever technique you're going to use. Whether it's a 5-minute fire, doing what I just said, making the teepee fire, and then lighting it with a match or with your lighter. If you've made your structure correctly and if you've collected dry stuff from a good area like I've explained just now, you should be able to light that with one match or one flip of your big lighter every single time. That's a great exercise and a great way to learn it.
Do you have any other skills that you're passionate about that you want to talk about?
A lot. I love bow making, and I haven't made a bow in several years now. But I love bow making. I love every part of it. Shoot, and I go out and I cut the wood. And there's different properties of each kind of wood you look for. And I do laminations and sinew backing and rawhide backing, and I do steam bending and just all the different cool stuff you can do. It's a lot of fun.
So I want to touch on one thing, is a time in your life when you were blind for 6 months.
What they did was they laser corrected my eye, and then now it takes like a month. Your eye has to heal so it's smooth again so you can see. But it heals from the outside in. So it's like your eyesight's horrible, and then right when it gets to the middle, all of a sudden you can see 20/20. That's what's supposed to happen. So my eyes were so dry, they weren't healing, and what happened was they began to scar over. So all this stuff was scarring over my pupils. And
so you were completely blind then from that, pretty much.
It was to the point where I couldn't I couldn't see a phone to make a phone call. I couldn't use a TV remote. I couldn't even see going around the house. It was just like I can see light and I could see a little bit of color. I couldn't even tell if I was facing the hallway or facing what. I was getting around by touch and by sound. But I ended up closing my eyes because if I opened my eyes, any light shined in, I would throw up. I would throw up instantly. So I would just keep my eyes shut. So it was like I was blind, and if I opened them, I would just start throwing up. So that really freaked me out, and eventually I ended up going to see a specialist in Boston, and he was able to fix my eyes. I thought I was never going to be able to go out in the woods or even work or do anything. I thought I was done. Yeah. So what I began to do is I began to, when I was just laying in bed, I just lay in bed all day. I began to work on spiritual skills and do a lot of meditating. And because the spiritual skills of this survival stuff has always been very, very, very hard for me. Mm-hmm. It's not a tangible physical skill that you see a direct outcome right away from. So it's very hard for me. But I began to focus a lot more on it then, and I had a few breakthroughs which shocked the shit out of me, to be honest. And at the same time, I was like, you know what? I can't be in the house anymore. And what I began doing was I'd feel my way down to the front door, unlock it, and I'd sit on the porch, and I'd wait for a car to drive by. Mm-hmm. And when the car would drive by, I'd walk out until I felt myself hit the driveway. I'd turn right, and I'd use the sound to guide me. And I began to dig a huge pit. That's my first scout pit. I dug the entire scout pit blind, by hand. It's 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, 4 feet deep, and it's still there. I dug that entire thing over the course of probably 2 months, a little bit at a time, every day. I'd go out there, wait for a car to drive by, use the sound to get over there, and then I'd crawl around and I'd find it by feel on my hands and knees. And then I covered it with sticks and branches, threw leaves on top when I was done. I'd work on that every day. So that kind of helped me too, to try to get my frustration out and work on something.
When did you finally kind of decide you're going to go see this other doctor and get your eyes fixed? Was there a moment when you're like, okay, this isn't going to ever get better without some additional help?
It was a combination of the whole situation. I could feel my arms, and I could tell how much weight I lost.
Yeah.
It was that noticeable. And I was just sick of just lying in bed all day and all night. So finally, she ended up driving me to Boston to see the doctor. But he was like, we're going to change this, and we're going to give you this gel for your eyes, this medicine for your eyes. We're going to take you off of your antihistamine allergy medicine for 3 weeks, and we're going to check your eyes, because he was like, your eyes are so scarred, I don't know if you're ever going to get your vision back. But then I saw him a month later, and he was like, your eyesight's better than 2020. It's better than 2020 now. It's crazy how well they heal.
What was that like then, going from complete darkness, and not even just literal darkness, darkness inside too, of your whole life probably felt like it was over. And then you're digging this, you're crawling to this scout pit and digging it with your hands, and then going getting your eyes fixed, and now being able to see again. What was that like, to be able to see again?
Yeah, when I didn't think I was going to be able to see again, I was like, I'm going to be honest with you, half the time I was digging that pit, I'm like, what am I doing? I'm digging my own grave here.
Yeah, you're going to just get into it and put the dirt on.
No, it's not big enough yet. It's not deep enough. Once my eyes were 20/20 or better, it's I would look around and I'm like, oh my God, everything is so sharp. It was like I had new eyes. Mm. It's the colors are popping more. It's it was different. And I was just really thankful, and I was like, I'm never going to take my eyes for granted. Never again now.
Yeah.
And I do sometimes.
Yeah. What a powerful experience.
It was.
Do you feel like it kind of happened for a reason?
But I'm like, yeah, I believe things happen for a reason to a point with that. And I think with my eyes, it helped me to kind of see how much pain and suffering I could take. And also work on, like I mentioned, I had a few breakthroughs with like spiritual skills, which are hard for me and continue to be hard for me. But honestly, I don't put that much work into them like I should.
Do you want to share?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's kind of off topic a little bit, but when I was the first one that happened, when I was blind, lying in bed, my wife and son were gone for the day. It was later on in the day, around evening time, when they would be coming home soon for dinner, and I had been in a meditation, lying in bed. And do you ever see that show, Dirty Jobs, with Mike Rowe? Do you know who he is?
Yeah, I know the show, but I haven't seen it.
Okay. I swear it was like, if you're looking at a TV screen, out of nowhere, this dude looked just like Mike Rowe with baseball cap and everything. He pops in from like the bottom right corner at an angle like this, and he goes, "Take the hammer," and then he pops back out. I heard it like he was right in front of me. I saw him. I can describe every detail of this guy. Looked kind of like Mike Rowe. And he goes, "Take the hammer," and then poof, he's gone. So I sit up and I'm like, what the F was that? Never had anything like that happen before, ever. It freaked me out, dude. So I lay back down and I'm like, take the hammer, take the hammer. And this really puzzled me. I'm thinking, and then I hear my wife and my son pull in the driveway. And they come inside. I hear her go say hi to Daddy, check on Daddy. He comes in the room, I'm lying there. My eyes are open, but I can't see anything. The lights are off, so my eyes are open. I'm laying on my back. I feel him climb up on the bed next to me. And I'm expecting him to give me a hug. Instead, I get hit in the eyeball. He had a toy plastic Little Tikes hammer. I still have it. I kept it because it's special because of this. And it took batteries, and when he'd hit something with it, it would go...
Sure, yeah.
He climbed up on the bed, and he whacked me in my open eye with it when I was healing from this eye surgery ordeal.
Yeah.
And he hit me in the open eye, and then he started giggling, and he climbed down and ran down the hallway. So I'm like, yeah, I should have taken the hammer.
Oh my God.
Crazy, right?
Right. I do want to touch on, I want to ask you one more thing. And then I kind of want to talk about just like your work now, teaching and everything, and your classes and everything like that. But I think it's important to touch on failure. I don't know if you have any thoughts on failure, because I feel like oftentimes that's where people get hung up, but I feel like that's also where you learn the most, is in your failures.
Yeah, you learn a lot from failure. With me, with the physical skills, I haven't had a lot of failures, I think because I grew up building things all the time. I have my own workbench. I've been working with hand tools. I also grew up watching Bob Ross and doing his oil paintings when I was in like middle school.
Yeah.
As far as making things with my hands and hard skills, I'm very determined, and I have experience enough that I usually make it happen. I had one failure which was interesting, talking about like the spiritual aspect of this. I'm sure you're familiar with hand drill or friction fire with hand drill. The first time I made a hand drill and tried it, and everyone always hyped up how hard it was compared to bow drill and all that stuff. First time I tried a hand drill, I got a cold. Within a minute, had a cold. Blew it into flame. Perfect.
Wow.
And then I was like, this ain't hard. And then after that, I could not get another cold for over a year, trying constantly. And I think it's because I got cocky. Seriously, it's because I got cocky.
Yeah.
And I didn't respect the skill anymore. And then after I was like, okay, well, I've got to be more careful and pay attention and be thankful for this and watch my technique. And I began to practice. Remember the technique was called floating? So your hands don't go down all the time?
Yeah.
Because every time you have to go back up to the top of the hand drill, you lose some heat and it takes longer. I began to learn how to do the floating. And that's when I really began to kind of like really get in sync with that skill. And I was able to start getting colds again. And now it's no problem. But that was my one big failure that I remember with the hard skills. And then with the spiritual skills, I'm just a mess. Because my mind races all the time, and I have a hard time slowing down and trying to be in the present and trying to just relax and let go and feel things, feel what's going on around you. But when I was blind and laying in bed all day in darkness is when I began to actually have visions of things and sensations and hearing things. And now mostly it's like when I go hunting, I'm more relaxed in the moment, and images of animal. Usually with me, it's not sound. It's I get a picture, like an actual picture pops in my head of an animal, but it pops in my head like in the air, like it'll be right there, or it'll be on the trail. When I go around this turn, it's going to be on the trail. Usually I only get like 5 seconds notice or 3 seconds notice. But that's how I find animals a lot of the times. This doesn't always happen, and I never know when it's going to happen, is the weird thing. I know to some people, this probably sounds crazy, like it's nuts, but being totally honest, man, this happens. And it happens a lot. It's happened with rabbits, it happens with birds, it happens a lot with squirrels, because they're my favorite. It happens with deer. I've found 3 deer antlers this way. Deer antlers just pop into my head. There's going to be a deer antler right there. I take a few more steps, there it is.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's very interesting. Right, let's talk about your work and where you're at now with things.
So I have 2 businesses. Animal World Experience I've run since 2006. That's still my main job, so I would travel around to schools, libraries. I do a lot with nursing homes too, and teach about, I have like 80 exotic animals here at the house, alligators, all kinds of stuff. So that's my main thing. And then also I began branching off of that, like underneath the umbrella of Animal World Experience, because people call me the Animal Man. Everyone knows me around here as the Animal Man. That's how I got Animal Man Survivor, which just began with just the YouTube channel. And then people began asking me if I could teach skills, and I began going to like libraries and teaching the teens. And then I went to a few to teach adults different things. So that's kind of how that started. And then I ended up like kind of separating the two into 2 separate entities. What I want to do is I want to have like a property where people, like Tracker School, where people come and they pay and come to a class for like a weekend. That's what I want to build up to eventually at some point. What I had been doing was YouTube, and then people would hire me for a library, or people would hire me to come to their home to teach them skills there. And that's all it was. And that's what it is still right now. Over the summer, we purchased 2 properties in Michigan that we're going to build off-grid cabins at and stuff, and think about maybe doing a weekend survival class and hosting it there. There would be kind of a cool spot. So that might be the next jump.
Do you have anything else that you want to talk about regarding your classes, or any projects you have coming up that you want to share?
For the survival stuff, everything is under the name of Animal Man Survivor. So I've got the website, animalmansurvivor.com, which I need to work on more. I've got the Animal Man Survivor YouTube. I also have Patreon. Got also Animal Man Survivor on Facebook and on Instagram. I find myself posting a lot more stuff on Instagram because I don't have to edit it. Like on YouTube, everything just takes longer and it's a pain in the neck, but Instagram, I throw photos up all the time.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for chatting today. It's been awesome.
This was cool.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Matt Gabriel, and if you'd like to learn more about Matt, you can check out the links below.